Ooh. It's new goggle day. Actually, 2 pairs of new goggles. I've been so excited about these arriving so I can actually try them out. These are some of those fitted goggles which I've been super excited to try. You've probably seen it, you do the whole face scanny thing, you send it off and some clever person sends you some goggles which are meant to be made exactly for you. And they're finally here. Just to be clear, the reason I haven't mentioned who they're by is that I'm not sponsored by them, I'm not affiliated by them, I'm just super excited to try them. I'll let you know how I get on in the next couple of weeks and whether they're actually worth it. But let's put those away, because that is not the focus of today's video. Today is all about practicing your race nutrition and going over just how important that actually is. Now, I'm sure you spend a heck of a lot of time training and putting in some blood, sweat and tears along the way. But how much time do you actually give to your nutrition and practicing exactly what you're going to be doing on race day? So we're going to talk about nutrition during your race today and how to make sure you can practice, things you need to think of and be aware of, and so when it comes to race day, you can race as well as possible. So what is up, nutrition nerds, and welcome back to another video. If you're new here, then hey, I'm James. This is one of the videos of the Triathlon Race Nutrition series, and in this we go over everything related to your race nutrition, whether that's in training, prep for your race, or during your race, to give you all of the information so that you can race as well as possible. I've got loads of videos coming up in the next couple of weeks and months on race nutrition, and if you want to stay up to date with all of that, then press subscribe and the notification icon and you'll get a little handy alert that pops up onto your phone when I release one of those videos. So in the last couple of weeks we've talked about the importance of breakfast and we've talked about carbohydrate loading. So today we're going to talk about the race specifically and the race nutrition prep. Now, it's important to practice your race day nutrition. If you don't, then you're much more likely to run into issues related to it, and things like diarrhea, abdominal cramps, bloating, stitches, all of that. And you don't want that on race day. So by practicing, you can reduce the likelihood of any of that happening to you. And you can make sure then that you practice so that you know what you're taking in to make sure that you don't underfuel yourself and sell yourself short. And the other reason to practice, not just from a physical point of view, is that not knowing exactly what you're doing with your nutrition can add in so much extra stress to your race day. And that's one of those things which you just really don't need. You don't want any unknowns when it comes to the day of your race. So things like where you're stashing your nutrition. You're putting it in your tri-suit at the back, in the front, down the side. Are you putting your nutrition in your bento box? Have you practiced drinking while you're riding? These are all things which, if you practice, aren't going to cause you any problems on the day. And this is one of those things which I practiced and found out the hard way that I really suck with. And it turns out I can't drink very well through a straw when I'm on the bike. Unless I'm really conscious of it, my breathing rate goes up and I end up just gulping air in. And then when it comes to the run, I get a really uncomfortable stitch, and that's ruined my run a couple of times. So by being aware of that, tailoring actually how much I really need to drink and regulating my breathing is then meant that my run has been a lot better. And there's probably something like that for you, which if you figure it out in advance, means it's not going to cause any issues on the day. So how can you practice this and what do you need to be aware of? Well, first things first, I would say, what distance are you doing? Because that will dictate how much you actually need to focus on nutrition during it. I've done a video on nutrition during a sprint triathlon because that's a bit different to what we're going to be talking about today, and I've linked that at the top of the screen for you. Some of what we talk about today, depending on how quickly you race a sprint triathlon, might be useful for you, but if not, give that video a watch. This video is more useful for anyone doing a standard or Olympic distance and upwards, so including any half iron, 70.3 or ironman events. Now, you'll probably know this already, but current nutrition guidelines for endurance sports lasting over about 90 minutes recommend somewhere between 60 grams to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. And that's because we have a limited store of carbohydrates and we can run out of them, but we do need them for when we race. So we have to take in a form of them, or essentially take them in while we race. Now, the source of carbohydrate here is actually important depending on how much carbohydrate you're targeting per hour. If you're aiming for 60 grams per hour, then you can use a glucose-only supplement. That means the source of carbohydrate is glucose, and you'll see that on the ingredients list as glucose, glucose syrup, or maltodextrin. If you're aiming for the higher values, so up near 90 grams, you also want to have fructose, which is another form of carbohydrates. And you'll see that on the ingredients list as fructose or fructose syrup, or perhaps as sucrose. The reason behind this is that we can only absorb so much glucose in one go, but we can absorb fructose at the same time, because essentially it uses what's called a different transporter to absorb it through our intestines. So by combining them, the aim is that we can absorb more carbohydrates. Now, this is really individual, and it's important to say that some individuals will be able to absorb a lot more in the way of carbohydrates compared to others. Some people might get some gastro symptoms off 40 grams per hour, while others might actually be able to tolerate up to about 120 grams of carbohydrates per hour. Theoretically, more is better, because it just means we have more carbohydrate available to use, which means we save our body's store of carbohydrates so that we can work harder for longer. And this is why we want to practice our race day nutrition, because if you can push it to the maximum that you can absorb, then realistically you're going to race better. But then that's why it's even more important to know what you can't tolerate, because actually if you get symptoms, less is more. You're going to be much better off reducing that amount to a level where you can race comfortably and happy without any kind of gastrointestinal distress, versus trying to cram in a few more carbohydrates and ending up having to stop because you've got a stitch or you feel really sick. So you practice and you see how high you can get before you get any issues. Now, I would advise that you practice using the exact supplement or race nutrition that you're going to on the day. So whatever pill, potion, powder, liquid, whatever it is that you're going to use on the day, use it in your training. And then practice the different disciplines with them to see how you get on. So you could go from swim to bike having had breakfast, you could go swim to run and just check that you don't get any tummy upset, or you could do a brick session where you practice your nutrition on the bike, head out for a run and see how it feels. Start at a lower amount, and if it feels good, then you can just push it that little bit more. Practice using a straw on your bike so that you know whether actually that's something which you can do really comfortably, or whether it stresses you out and raises your breathing, which might lead to gastro upset down the line. Now, it's really important to make sure that you do practice your race nutrition at your race pace. We know that as we work harder, the amount of blood flow to our abdominal organs, including our intestines, decreases, because we're sending all of that blood to our muscles. So as you work harder, the amount that you'll actually be able to absorb will decrease because you don't have the blood available, which means you need to practice it at your race pace. Otherwise, you might feel really comfortable just happily running or biking at a really easy pace and thinking, I got this, I can absorb so much, no upset at all. But then you go to race day, try it at your race pace and think, bugger, I feel sick, I feel grotty, and that's actually just because your tolerance for absorbing whatever it is that you're having will just differ at your race pace versus a much easier pace. If you do that, you should be able to work out what works well for you and what doesn't, and whether you can increase it or whether actually you need to just drop it down a bit. I did a video a couple of weeks ago where we looked at a study which investigated the differences between a bar, a gel and a liquid-based form of carbohydrates, and whether there was any difference in performance and gastrointestinal symptoms between them. The answer is that there was a difference between them, and one of them actually seemed to worsen performance compared to the others, and I've linked the video at the top of the screen if you'd like to watch that. Otherwise, that's it for today's video, and I hope you found it useful and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you've got any races coming up and whether race nutrition is actually something that you've thought of, or whether you're now going to go out and practice it. As always, I'd really appreciate it if you gave the video a thumbs up and press subscribe if you haven't to stay up to date with everything that I release. And I'll catch you next week where we talk about hydration for a triathlon. And it's a good one. I'll see you then.